The very moment my daughter-in-law told me to pay the bill and leave the house if I couldn't handle her mother's insults, something inside me became completely still. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply decided to take her advice. My name is Margaret Whitfield, and I am 64 years old. I had been a widow for 5 years, and during those years, I had learned something valuable. Peace is worth protecting. That evening, however, I had no idea just how much my family was about to change. My son Nathan and his wife Brooke had invited me to dinner at an upscale seafood restaurant downtown. They called it a family night, and despite everything that had happened between Brooke and me over the years, I genuinely wanted to enjoy it. Before I tell you what happened that day, please subscribe to the Granny's Life Abroad channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are watching from now and what time it is there. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's shout out goes to Mariah. Thank you, Mariah, for being part of this great family. When I arrived, Brooke's mother, Diane, was already sitting in the booth. I knew immediately that it would be a long evening. Diane had a talent for making cruel comments sound like casual conversation. She looked me up and down before I had even removed my coat. "That's an interesting blouse," she said. I smiled politely. "Thank you. I suppose comfort becomes more important at our age." Brooke laughed softly. Nathan looked down at the menu. I had seen that reaction before. Whenever Brooke or Diane became difficult, Nathan disappeared emotionally. He was physically present, but he rarely defended anyone strongly enough to make a difference. We ordered our meals. For the first few minutes, conversation stayed harmless. We discussed the weather, Nathan's job, and some repairs Brooke and Nathan had recently made to their house. Then Diane leaned toward me. "So, Margaret, what do you actually do all day?" I looked at her. "Keep busy." She smiled. "Must be nice. No husband to care for. No children at home, no demanding career. You probably have hours and hours to yourself." Brooke took a sip of wine. I recognized the setup. "I enjoy having some quiet time," I answered. Diane chuckled. "Quiet time. That's one way to describe being alone." Nathan shifted in his seat. "Mom's doing fine, Diane." His voice was so quiet that it almost disappeared beneath the restaurant noise. Diane ignored him. "I just don't understand people who retire and then spend all their time hovering around their children." I placed my fork beside my plate. "I don't hover around anyone." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Really? 'Cause Nathan says you call quite often." Brooke immediately joined in. "Mom, she doesn't mean anything by it. Margaret just worries too much." I looked at Brooke. "I call my son because he's my son." I shrugged. "And sometimes you take things personally." That sentence was becoming Brooke's favorite excuse. Whenever her mother insulted me, it was a joke. Whenever I objected, I was too sensitive. Whenever Nathan looked uncomfortable, everyone pretended not to notice. Diane took another bite of salmon. "Well, at least you have that big house. I'm sure it keeps you occupied." I stared at her. "Yes, it does. For bedrooms, right?" "That's right. Seems excessive for one person." Brooke smiled. "I've told Margaret that too." Something about the way she said it bothered me. Not because she thought my house was too large, because I suddenly remembered conversations I had overheard during Thanksgiving. Brooke and Nathan had casually discussed how convenient it would be if they eventually moved into my house. They had talked about renovating the kitchen. They had talked about turning the upstairs bedroom into an office. They had even joked about how much money they could save. Never once had either of them asked me what I wanted. I pushed the thought aside. Then Diane delivered the final insult. "You know, Margaret, maybe you're lonely because you haven't learned how to let other people live their lives." I took a slow breath. "Maybe." Brooke rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Mom is joking." I looked directly at her. Insults don't become jokes just because everyone laughs afterward. The smile disappeared from Brooke's face. She leaned closer. "Honestly, Margaret, you make everything so difficult." Nathan whispered. "Brooke." She ignored him. "If you don't like my mother's sense of humor, you can pay the bill and leave." The words hung between us. For several seconds nobody moved. Brooke expected me to apologize. Diane expected me to become embarrassed. Nathan expected me to somehow fix the situation. Instead, I smiled. That's an excellent idea. I raised my hand and called the waiter. I'll take care of the entire check. Nathan finally looked up. Mom, you don't have to. It's fine. The waiter brought the receipt. Paid without hesitation. Then I stood, slipped my coat over my shoulders, and picked up my purse. Brooke looked satisfied until I spoke. Thank you for the invitation. I looked at Nathan. I'm driving myself home. Since you and Brooke came with me, you'll need to arrange your own ride. Nathan's expression changed instantly. Brooke's mouth fell open. Diane stared at me. I walked toward the exit without looking back. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. For the first time that evening, I smiled for real. I had paid the bill. I had followed Brooke's instructions, but I wasn't finished. The next morning, Nathan would discover that the dinner wasn't the only thing I had decided to walk away from. My phone rang at 8 the next morning. I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of black coffee, watching sunlight spread across the lawn. The screen showed Nathan's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Mom, what were you thinking last night? His voice was tense. Good morning to you too. You embarrassed us. I took another sip of coffee. Oh, Brooke is furious. She says you made her look terrible and we had to take an Uber home. I smiled faintly. Brooke told me to pay the bill and leave. She didn't mean literally. Then she should choose her words more carefully. Nathan sighed. Mom, you know how Brooke is. Yes, I do. She says you owe her and Diane an apology. I looked across the yard at the flower beds I had planted after my husband's death. Oh. There was silence. What do you mean no? I mean I'm not apologizing for leaving a table where I was being insulted. Mom, nobody was trying to hurt you. Nathan, your mother-in-law, criticized my clothes, questioned my finances, called me lonely, and suggested I was desperate for your attention. She was joking. Then she needs better jokes. Nathan became quiet. I knew he was uncomfortable, but I also knew something else. He wasn't angry because I had been mistreated. He was angry because I had stopped tolerating it. Brooke says you shouldn't come over until you apologize. Smiled. That works perfectly for me. Mom, I hope you have a good weekend, Nathan. I ended the call. Then I sat there for several minutes listening to the birds. I expected guilt. Never came. Instead, I felt strangely calm. That was when I started thinking about all the things I had quietly paid for over the years. Nathan was 30. Brooke was 29. Both had full-time jobs. Yet I was still paying several of their expenses. It had started when Nathan was in college. I had added him to my family phone plan because his internship barely covered his rent. After he married Brooke, I added her line too. I had never thought much about it. I was his mother. Helping him had felt natural. I also paid their auto insurance. Again, it had started innocently. But somewhere along the way, helping had become expected. Nobody thanked me anymore. Nobody even mentioned it. And after last night's dinner, I finally understood something. They weren't treating my financial support as generosity. They were treating it as something they were entitled to. I opened my laptop. The phone account took less than 5 minutes. I removed both lines from my family plan. A confirmation appeared on the screen. Their service would continue briefly before they needed to establish their own payment arrangement. Clicked confirm. Then I opened my insurance account. Nathan's truck, Brooke's sedan, both removed. I requested written confirmation and closed the browser. That was it. No angry text, no warning call, no dramatic speech. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply stopping. For years, I had mistaken financial support for love. Now I understood the difference. Love could remain. The bills could go. I spent the afternoon gardening. I trimmed my roses, pulled weeds, and repotted several herbs. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt completely quiet. Then Tuesday arrived. That's when Nathan showed up. I was wiping down the kitchen counter when I heard a truck pull into the driveway. Through the window I watched him get out. He didn't look happy. A moment later there was a hard knock. Open the door. Nathan stood there holding his phone. My phone stopped working. He nodded. He stared at me. Brooks did too. And the insurance company says our cars aren't covered under your policy anymore. That's correct. His eyes widened. You actually did this. I did. Why? I folded the dish towel in my hands. 'Cause you are 30 years old. His face reddened. This is about dinner. It's about more than dinner. You're punishing me because Brooke upset you. Whoa. I looked directly into his eyes. I'm adjusting my finances because I realized I was paying for adults who didn't treat me with basic respect. We can't suddenly afford all of this. You have jobs. That doesn't mean we have hundreds of extra dollars every month. You'll figure it out. He paced across the kitchen. You could have warned us. Could have. Then why didn't you? I considered his question. Because I didn't want another argument. He stopped. Continued. I wasn't asking permission to stop paying your bills, Nathan. His expression changed. For perhaps the first time he understood that this wasn't a temporary tantrum. It was a decision. He rubbed his forehead. Brooke is going to lose her mind. He sighed. That is something the two of you will have to handle together. He looked toward the hallway. Mom, you're really serious about this. Completely. He stood there silently. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around. You've changed. I gave him a small smile. No, Nathan. I finally stopped pretending nothing was wrong. He left. I closed the door behind him. The house became quiet again, but the next morning someone else arrived. And this time Nathan wasn't alone. The next morning I was sitting in my armchair reading when I heard a sharp knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Another knock came, harder this time. I walked toward the entrance and looked through the glass panel. Brooke stood on my porch. Beside her was Diane, of course. I kept the heavy screen door locked and opened the inner door. Brooke immediately frowned. Open the door, Margaret. We need to talk. We can talk right here. Diane crossed her arms. Don't be ridiculous. You're acting like a child. I looked at her calmly. You're standing on my porch criticizing me again. I'm not sure I'm the one acting childish. Brooke's face tightened. You cut off our phones and insurance. Yes, that was incredibly petty. No, it was a financial decision. You did it because you're angry with me. I did it because I no longer want to pay those expenses after everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me, Brooke? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Diane stepped forward. We're family. Family members don't humiliate each other at dinner. Diane scoffed. Oh please. You are still upset about a few jokes. Few jokes. I looked directly at her. You criticized my clothes, mocked my life, questioned why I was alone, and suggested I was desperate for my own son's attention. Diane shrugged. You've become too sensitive. No, I shook my head. I've become less willing to tolerate disrespect. Brooke folded her arms. You are tearing this family apart, I answered quietly. No, Brooke. I'm setting a boundary. What happens after that depends on how everyone chooses to behave. She stared at me. Then her expression changed. You've always been difficult. I smiled sadly. And you've always confused obedience with kindness. For a moment nobody spoke. The morning breeze moved through the trees behind them. Finally, Brooke said, You're really going to keep punishing us? I am not punishing you. I rested one hand on the door. I'm simply no longer financing your household. Diane rolled her eyes. You'll regret treating your son this way. I looked at her. Perhaps. Then I smiled. But regret is better than resentment. Brooke stepped closer. Nathan is your son. You could lose him. That sentence hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But I had spent too many years allowing fear to control me. I hope I never lose my son, I said. But I won't keep buying his affection. Brooke's face went pale. I had never said anything so directly to her. She turned toward Diane. Come on. Diane looked back at me. This isn't over. I gave her a polite smile. For me, it is. I closed the door, then I locked it. I could hear them talking loudly on the porch for another minute before their footsteps finally disappeared. I returned to my chair. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from relief. A week passed. No calls, no messages, no visits. The silence was strangely peaceful. During that week, I started noticing things about my home that I hadn't noticed in years. The 4 bedrooms, the enormous dining room, the staircase I rarely used, the guest room that had been untouched for months, the property taxes, the constant maintenance. Suddenly, the house felt less like a home and more like a responsibility. Then I remembered something. Thanksgiving. I had been walking past the kitchen when I overheard Nathan and Brooke talking. They thought I couldn't hear them. They had discussed moving into my house someday. Brooke wanted the kitchen renovated. Nathan wanted the basement finished. They had talked about how much money they could save. Neither one had asked me whether I wanted them there. They had simply assumed. That memory settled something inside me. The next morning I called a real estate agent. Her name was Renata Cole. She arrived 2 days later with a tablet, a measuring tape, and an experienced smile. She walked through every room. When she returned to the living room, she nodded. This property should move quickly. How quickly? If we price it correctly, potentially within days. I looked around. This house had been filled with memories. My husband's old chair, Nathan's childhood photographs, Christmas mornings, birthday dinners, arguments, laughter, loss. But memories didn't require 4 bedrooms. I signed the listing agreement. That afternoon I began packing. I started with Nathan's old belongings. His baseball trophies, his high school yearbooks, boxes of comic books, old photographs. Everything went neatly into the garage. I didn't throw anything away. I simply gave him back what belonged to him. Then I started looking for a smaller place. A condo, 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, large windows, a small patio somewhere I could grow herbs without spending every weekend mowing grass. For the first time in years, I wasn't planning my future around Nathan. I was planning it around myself. The real estate sign went into my front yard on Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Nathan arrived. This time he rang the bell. When I opened the door, he stared past me. Cardboard boxes filled the hallway. His eyes moved toward the yard. Then he saw the sign, his face drained of color. What is that? I looked at him calmly. It's a for sale sign. He stared at me. You're selling the house. Why? I stepped aside. Because I don't need it anymore. He walked inside slowly. Then he whispered the words that confirmed everything I had feared. But Mom, this is our family home. I looked at my son. No, Nathan. I shook my head. This is my home. And for the first time, he realized the house he had quietly counted as his future was never his to begin with. Nathan stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the boxes as though they had appeared overnight. You can't sell this place, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because it's the family home. I almost smiled. Nathan, I've lived here for 22 years. No. It's my house. I know that too. Then I don't understand the problem. He rubbed the back of his neck. Brooke and I were planning to move in eventually. There it was. Not a request, not a conversation, a plan. Their plan. See, I said. Nathan looked uncomfortable. We thought it would make sense. You'd have less maintenance and we'd help take care of you. I don't need to be taken care of. But you're getting older. I looked at him carefully. Getting older doesn't mean becoming incapable. He sighed. Mom, you know what I mean. Yes, I do. My voice remained calm. You mean you expected this house to become yours someday? He didn't answer. His silence told me enough. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. What's going on? He asked. It's Brooke. He answered and immediately put her on speaker. Did you see what she did? Brooke demanded. I just got here. Ask her what she thinks she's doing. I looked at the phone. I'm selling my house. Brooke's voice became sharp. You're throwing away Nathan's inheritance. I took a slow breath. Brooke, I am 64, not dead. There was silence. I don't have an inheritance to distribute yet. I have an asset that belongs to me. But you know this house was supposed to stay in the family. According to whom? She didn't answer. Continued. I worked for this house. Paid the mortgage. Paid the taxes. I maintained it. Your expectations don't give you ownership. Brooke became angry. This is all because of dinner. Well, I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. Dinner simply made me realize how comfortable you had become treating me badly. You are unbelievable. And you're entitled to your opinion. I handed the phone back to Nathan. Before he could say anything, I pointed toward the garage. Your belongings are packed. He looked startled. What? 3 boxes. Your school records, trophies, old photographs and comic books. Nathan, take them today. He stared at me. I could see the disappointment on his face, but underneath it was something else. Fear. He had finally realized I wasn't bluffing. He collected his boxes silently. At the doorway he turned around. Are you really doing this? You're going to leave this whole neighborhood. He lowered his eyes. Then he left. 4 days later the house was sold. A young couple named Marcus and Olivia bought it. They were excited about the garden and loved the old fireplace in the living room. When they came to sign the final paperwork, I watched them walk through the house together. They were happy. Their excitement didn't hurt. Instead, it made me realize something. A home wasn't the walls. It was the life people built inside them. And I was ready to build another life. A month later, moving day arrived. Professional movers carried my furniture into my new condo across town. The condo was smaller, much smaller. But when I walked through the front door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. There were 2 bedrooms. One became my bedroom. The other became a reading room. The kitchen had bright cabinets and wide windows. Outside was a private patio where I placed terracotta pots for basil, rosemary, tomatoes and mint. I didn't need 4 bedrooms anymore. I didn't need a massive dining room. I didn't need a house large enough to accommodate people who only appreciated me when I was paying for something. I needed peace. That afternoon, while the movers loaded the last box, Nathan's truck pulled up. Brooke was with him. They stood on the sidewalk staring at the empty house. Brooke's expression was impossible to read. Finally she spoke. I can't believe you actually did it. Closed the trunk of my car. Told you I would. She folded her arms. You're going to be lonely. I looked at my new condo, then back at her. I'd rather be lonely in a peaceful home than surrounded by people who make me feel unwanted. Nathan looked down. He seemed ashamed. I reached into my purse and handed him an envelope. That's my new address. He opened it. You can visit any time, I said. But call first. His eyes lifted. I looked at Brooke. And Diane isn't welcome. Brooke's mouth opened. Before she could respond, Nathan spoke. Stop, Brooke. She turned toward him. What? Said. Stop. His voice was firm. For the first time he wasn't whispering. He wasn't looking at the ground. He was standing beside me. My son had finally found his voice. Brooke stared at him in disbelief. Nathan looked back at me. I'm sorry, Mom. He nodded. Thank you. I didn't hug him. Not yet. Some wounds needed time. Got into my car. As I drove away from the house, I didn't look back. That night, I sat on my new patio with a cup of tea. The city lights shimmered beyond the balcony. My old house was gone. My old routine was gone. Even my relationship with Nathan had changed. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had spent years believing that protecting my family meant sacrificing my own comfort. Now I understood the truth. Sometimes protecting yourself is the first step toward teaching others how to respect you. And I had no idea yet that Nathan would soon come back to my door alone. The first few weeks in my condo felt almost unreal. No one was arguing in my kitchen. No one was criticizing the way I dressed. No one was making plans for my house while assuming I would eventually disappear from it. I woke up when I wanted, made coffee slowly, and spent my mornings tending to the plants on my patio. For the first time in years, my home felt completely mine. Nathan didn't call. I didn't call him either. I had expected the silence to hurt more. Course I missed my son. But missing someone didn't mean I had to chase them. Brooke sent one message during the second week. Hope you're happy with what you've done to this family. I read it once, then I deleted it. I wasn't interested in another argument. A few weeks later, the holiday season arrived. I decorated my condo with a small tree and several ornaments I had collected throughout my marriage. I placed my husband's favorite wooden angel near the top. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and pine. I was hanging lights around the window when my phone buzzed. It was Nathan. I stared at his name for several seconds before answering. Hello, Mom. His voice sounded different. Tired, not angry. Hi, Nathan. Are you busy? Not really. There was a pause. Can I come over? Smiled. Course. Just me. I understood what he meant. That's fine. An hour later he knocked on my door. When I opened it, he stood there holding a bakery box. I brought your favorite. I looked inside. Cinnamon pastries. You remembered. Course I remembered. I stepped aside. Come in. He walked slowly into the condo. His eyes moved around the room. This place is nice. I like it. It's smaller. That's the idea. He smiled faintly. We sat on the patio with coffee for several minutes. Neither of us said anything. Then Nathan finally spoke. Mom, I'm sorry. I looked at him. For what? For everything. He stared down at his cup. I should have stopped Diane that night. I remained quiet. I should have stopped Brooke too. His voice cracked slightly. Instead I just sat there. He nodded. You did. I was afraid of making things worse. And you thought letting things continue would make them better. He sighed. No. The honesty in his voice softened something inside me. How are things with Brooke? Yes. He looked away. Not good. I didn't celebrate. I didn't say I had warned him. I simply listened. Since we started paying our own bills, everything changed, he continued. We had no idea how much you were covering. You should have. No. He rubbed his hands together. Brooke says you did it to punish us. I didn't. No. He looked at me. That's the thing I finally understand. Waited. You didn't take anything away from us. He swallowed. You just stopped giving us things. He nodded. Exactly. He leaned back in his chair. I thought you would eventually give us the house too. The confession didn't surprise me. What made you think that? 'Cause you always helped. He looked embarrassed. Whenever we needed something, you stepped in. That was my mistake. He shook his head. Helping wasn't the mistake. Expecting it was. For the first time, I reached across the table and touched his hand. That distinction matters. He looked at me. I don't want money from you. No. I don't want your house. It's not mine anymore. He smiled sadly. I know that too. We sat quietly. Then Nathan said something I hadn't expected. Do you think we can start over? I looked at my son. Not the 30-year-old man who had sat silently through an insulting dinner. Not the husband who had allowed his wife to speak for him. Just my son. Think we can try. His eyes became wet. Thank you. I gave him a small smile. But starting over doesn't mean going backward. He nodded. Understand. No more unpaid bills. Understand. No surprise visits. Understand. And nobody gets to insult me in my own home. He nodded again. Especially Diane. I laughed softly. Especially Diane. For the first time that evening, Nathan laughed too. He stayed for nearly 2 hours. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me. It was a long hug, the kind of hug I hadn't realized I had been waiting for. I'm proud of you, Mom, he whispered. Closed my eyes. I'm proud of you too. After he left, I returned to the patio. The night was quiet. I looked at the little tomato plants growing beneath the lights. I had once believed losing my old house would be the hardest part of this journey. It wasn't. The hardest part had been accepting that my own son had become comfortable watching me be disrespected. But the greatest surprise was discovering that boundaries didn't necessarily destroy relationships. Sometimes they revealed which relationships were strong enough to survive without money holding them together. Nathan had finally come back. Not because I bought his loyalty, not because I offered him a house, not because I paid his bills. He came back because he finally understood that having a mother who loved him didn't mean having a mother he could take for granted. And that lesson changed both of us. But there was still one final thing I needed to understand. I had spent years thinking peace meant keeping everyone else happy. Now I had to learn what peace really meant for me. Months passed and my life became quieter in ways I had never expected. I still loved my son. I still missed the family dinners, the holidays, and even the noisy evenings when Nathan was younger and the house felt full. But I no longer confused love with obligation. That was the lesson I had fought hardest to learn. One Sunday morning Nathan called. "Mom, are you home?" "Yes." "Can I stop by?" "Of course." He arrived 20 minutes later carrying another box of pastries. I teased. "If you keep bringing these, I'm going to need a bigger reading room." He laughed. "Then I'll bring fruit next time." We sat together on the patio. Nathan had changed. Not dramatically. He was still my son, still imperfect, still learning. But he no longer expected me to solve his problems. He had taken responsibility for his bills, his marriage, and his choices. And that mattered more to me than any apology. "How are things?" "Yes." He sighed. "Better with Brooke." He hesitated. "We're trying." He nodded. "I hope it works out." He looked surprised. "You really mean that?" "Course. I didn't need Brooke to fail for me to succeed." That was another lesson I had learned. My peace didn't depend on anyone else's unhappiness. Nathan looked toward the garden. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "That dinner." Smiled. "The seafood." "No," he laughed. "Mom, you know what I mean." Waited. "I keep thinking about how you didn't yell." He looked at me. "You didn't insult anyone back. You didn't make a scene. You just paid the bill and left." Shrugged. "I was tired." "That was the strongest thing you could have done." Smiled. "Sometimes walking away is stronger than winning an argument." He nodded. "I understand that now." After he left, I sat alone on the patio. The afternoon sun warmed my face. My herbs were growing. The tomatoes were beginning to turn red. And suddenly I realized something. I had spent years believing that protecting my family meant keeping everyone comfortable. If Nathan needed money, I helped. If Brooke was upset, I apologized. If Diane made a cruel remark, I laughed it off. I thought peace meant avoiding conflict. But that wasn't peace. That was exhaustion. Real peace was different. Real peace meant being able to sit in your own home without wondering who might insult you next. It meant saying no without feeling guilty. It meant understanding that generosity is a gift, not a contract. And it meant knowing that people who truly love you won't demand that you sacrifice your dignity to prove it. I never regretted selling the house. Not once. The young couple who bought it occasionally sent me photographs of the garden. They had planted flowers along the walkway and restored the old fireplace. I was happy for them. That house had served its purpose in my life. Now it belonged to someone else. My new condo wasn't nearly as grand. But every room felt peaceful. My reading room became my favorite place. There were books along the walls, photographs of my husband, and a small wooden box filled with letters Nathan had written when he was a child. Sometimes I opened that box and remembered the little boy he had been. I didn't hate the man he became. I simply refused to accept the parts of his behavior that hurt me. That distinction allowed me to forgive him without abandoning myself. As for Diane, I never invited her back. Brooke eventually understood that my boundary wasn't negotiable. She didn't have to like me. I didn't have to like her. But if she wanted a relationship with Nathan's mother, respect had to be part of it. And surprisingly, over time the hostility faded. There were no dramatic apologies, no emotional family meeting, just distance. Sometimes distance is enough. Looking back, the biggest change wasn't financial. It wasn't selling my house. It wasn't canceling the phone plan or insurance. It was the moment I realized I didn't need permission to protect my own peace. I had spent decades being a mother, a wife, a provider, a problem solver. But beneath all those roles was a woman who deserved respect too. That woman had been waiting quietly for years. And finally I listened to her. If there is one thing I hope someone takes from my story, it's this. You don't have to scream to establish a boundary. You don't have to insult people who insult you. You don't have to prove that you're right. Sometimes you simply stop participating. You stop paying for what adults should pay themselves. You stop opening the door to people who come only to criticize you. You stop explaining decisions that belong entirely to you. And you stop confusing guilt with love. The night Brooke told me to pay the bill and leave, she thought she was humiliating me. She had no idea she was giving me the permission I had been waiting for. Paid the bill. I walked away. And eventually I built a life where I no longer had to earn respect by giving everything I had. I didn't lose my family. I found the healthier version of it. Most importantly, I found myself again. And sometimes that's the greatest inheritance a person can leave for themselves. A peaceful life, a clear conscience, and the courage to finally say, "This is where I draw the line."